Hey everyone, and welcome to my Procreate demo for the piece I call the Accessory. So a bit ago, I was coming home from work and I saw a woman wearing an outfit similar to this, and she was just very put together and she looked business oriented, and there was something about her look that I just thought it'd be really fun to draw her and then add like a big robot arm. So that's how this whole thing came out. I thought it'd be cool to make the robot arm kind of fashionable looking, or like she has some purpose for having this big robot arm, and she also has it modded to match what she's wearing so that it doesn't look outrageous in her mind. So that's sort of how this whole thing started. And I thought it'd be good to have her be in profile walking because it would just create a somewhat striking image. So that's what I was going for. So what you see here is the very early stages of the rough. You could see a minute ago that it was super rough and it was just about general layout. I wanted to have the arm originally to be a little bit more diagonal across the entire piece, but I knew that really wasn't going to work out. And I also wanted her to be really tall. So you can see here she's actually fairly short. And so this is all just being roughed in. Now right there it jumps to an elongated version of her. I actually don't know why it jumps so much there, but essentially I just took the head and cut it and then took the body and stretched it vertically. And now I'm going through and actually making sure this works right. So I'm adjusting her stride so that she actually looks like she's walking for real, and just trying to figure out all of the little details. At this point too, I actually switched to a larger res file. Once I'm done with this rough, I go to a larger res file because I wanted to make sure that she could be small enough in the frame so that it looked the way I wanted it to look, but that it was high enough resolution that I could also do like zoom ins and do things like that. So this is a slightly higher res than I normally do. I think I might have actually, yeah, it's not slightly higher, it's double. It's double what I normally do. So it's like 22 inches by 16 inches or something like that. So now we're getting into the tighter lines. At this point, I have her figured out well enough that I feel like I can move into details on her, but I haven't figured out the arm yet. So the arm waits until the end. I felt if I didn't nail this chick and her fashion and all that stuff accurately, that it wasn't going to matter if I got the arm looking cool or not. So not only am I really paying attention to making sure that she comes off accurate, but I'm looking up lots of reference for the coat that she's wearing and the purse that she has and her shoes to make sure that I'm capturing something that at least feels real. The thing that I thought was kind of funny was I didn't know the exact name of the type of coat she was wearing, the woman that I saw, but I wanted to make sure I had that coat in my mind. So I just Googled fashion coat, and it was like the third one in the Google search. So I thought that was quite possibly the luckiest Google search I've ever had. So now we move down. You can see I repositioned the purse so that there was a little bit more movement in her walk, and then I'm just trying to get in all of the details of this coat. So I found a coat online that was essentially what I was looking for, but I still changed a couple of things. It just made more sense to, or it was something that I preferred another thing. So that's what's going on here now. now a majority of the coat's been figured out, but sometimes it's about anchoring yourself and really filling in everything that you need to fill in to feel like you're doing the right thing and that it's comfortable as an artist. So even though the coat's not completely done, I moved on to the legs so that I could just make sure that I had her anchored and she's, you know, touching the ground properly and all those things. So here we finish off the leg and then move into the shoes she's wearing. These are loosely based off of a pair of shoes that I saw online. It's actually kind of funny because the style of them is that they have like a zipper that's closed at the top and then open at the bottom, which I was sort of worried that people might think I put the zipper on wrong, but the actual zipper to get the shoe on and off is on the inside, and it's like hidden with a much finer zipper. So the zipper on these is just purely decorative, the ones that are on the outside. So here, again, this is where reference is really important because I'm not a fashion designer and I don't partake in ladies fashion, and I do actually watch shows like Project Runway and all that kind of stuff, but that gives you still such a small knowledge. So it's about trying to reference things as much as possible whenever you get into these areas that you don't know. So now I actually just duplicated the leg, rotated it, and then went through that base leg to make sure that there were the right things changed on the anatomy. So you see we adjusted that zipper in there, got the leg all sorted, and now we're going to move up to the purse. Again, making sure that I referenced things. I referenced the purse that actually exists so that it felt right. And while this wasn't, at this point, I just have sort of like a small image of what that original woman who inspired everything was wearing. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm keying from the same world. So I looked up some sort of, you know, trendy purses and found one that looked pretty cool and started working with it from there. Now that she is basically done, we're going to move on to the actual robot arm so that you can see that I took that base rough and then I started doing a slightly cleaner rough so that I could actually figure out the details and how this was going to work. I didn't really know if I wanted it to be a claw or if I wanted it to have full 4 fingers or 2 fingers. I decided to split the difference and go with 3, and just filling in all the little gaps and mechanery. And I knew that I wanted to have some sort of a pattern on it. I mean, the sort of go-to thing would be to put like a Louis Vuitton pattern on it, but I didn't want it to be tied to any company or make up some fake company. So I ultimately go with houndstooth. But at this point, I didn't really know what I wanted to be like a houndstoothy pattern and what I wanted to be gold, or even if I wanted to be gold or if I wanted to be chrome. So at this point, I'm just trying to make sure I design a really cool arm, because the thought here is that for some reason she has to have this big arm, whether it's for fighting crime or, you know, I don't know, whatever. There's no backstory. But once that was put on her, she then had the modifications made. So I didn't want to overly think about the fashion aspects of the actual core design of this. I wanted it to be something where, you know, I guess you could say she was saddled with this robot arm and then she did the best she could with it, basically. Eventually I put like a little charm on it that's sort of on the underside. I actually wanted to do that from the beginning and I totally forgot. It's one of those things where you have an idea and you want to make sure you put it in, and then by the time you're actually doing the piece, you totally forget about it. I had this idea for this around the same time I had the idea for the Spike Spiegel piece, and this was the first time, maybe ever, if not, it's at least very rare, that I actually made a note when I came up with the original ideas. So you could tell that I recently was really scrounging for good ideas, and because otherwise I wouldn't have made that note. I just would have, you know, oh, there's plenty of ideas, I'll just keep drawing. But this was a time where I was like, oh no, I've been really dry lately. So as soon as I had like a good idea, I made sure that I took a note of it. Here, because of the perspective, I basically just do one vent, duplicate it twice, and then erase away what I don't need. that's nice because then it gives it an even more machined look. So the repetition isn't that, it doesn't look too repetitive because you're sort of anticipating that with something that's mechanical anyhow. So the design of the arm isn't really thought out in the sense that I didn't have a distinct purpose for it. I knew that I wanted to have jet type things on it. I knew I wanted it to be rugged, and otherwise it was just sort of about trying to figure out nice design points. So that my favorite part of the whole arm is that big ass elbow that's coming out of the back. I just think that's really fun. It's like this big rotatable shock absorbing elbow for whatever reason, and then it's got these jets on it potentially for like a big jet powered punch. Maybe the things at the top are also exhaust, you know, I don't know. A lot of it was just because it looked cool, but there wasn't a whole lot of intention behind some of the designs here. In the middle of doing the piece, you try to come up with some intentions, like the way that I split up that part of the hand is because I was thinking, well, maybe the inner part of the hand is some sort of heavy-duty cloth, and then it needs to have these plates so that that part will bend. You know, just all this like faux mechanic stuff, that just trying to make it believable and make it look like somebody in that world built it and there was a reason for them doing that. So now we get into some of the more geary type stuff. Oh, this little thing here under what would be sort of like the robotic bicep, that's supposed to be like a little rubber stopper. I just thought it'd be kind of funny if the thing, every now and then her arm can bend like a little too hard, so they just put like a little rubber thing in there to keep it from hitting metal on metal. So here I just use a circle brush, made a whole bunch of circles and sized them. After I do sort of the initial circle, I just duplicate that circle and size it. That way it's sizing to its center point. It's a real quick way to just get a bunch of little turny bits going, and then I sort of support those turny bits with a lot of extra metallic framing. That way it looks like it's all there for a reason, as opposed to just being a bunch of circles. Made sure to get this tube in here. I originally was going to make all that tube dark, like rubber, like a rubber hose. But then you'll see once we get to the flats, I decide to make the purse a light color because that just seemed more fashionable. And then I make the tube the same thing. So it was just sort of something that kind of came together and was somewhat nice. Of course, the question usually is, what brushes did I use for this? I, of course, used the fat pencil for all the drawing on it, which is linked down below in the comments, or in the description, I should say. And for the flats and all that, I just used the round, flat airbrush with no softness to it whatsoever, which we'll get to the flats in a bit. And then for things like the redness around her nose or her ears or her eyeshadow, I just use a soft brush. So fairly straightforward as far as all of the brushes go. And I'll try to comment on anything else that's more of a unique brush that I use, but this one was pretty standard all the way around. Here's a scenario where I use a circle and then I warp it to be an ellipses, and then I duplicate it and erase it and then start tracing over that ellipses. And by doing it on a 90-degree angle like this, I can then also guarantee that my horizontal lines will be completely flat and straight in order to do this very mechanical machined piece to her arm. So here you can see now duplicating of the line, and so that I get this canister looking object, and then you can bring it over and warp it and do whatever, size it and rotate it so that it fits in there properly. And so then at the very end here, I decide that extra stuff in the rough at the very top, I start to build it, and then I'm like, you know what, that's too much. Let's leave the silhouette exactly where it's at, and let's get on to some flatting. So you can see first I fill in the background with that dark gradient going from the bottom to the top, and then I just use a straight line to erase away the white floor that she's walking on. I wanted to keep this very simple because it would emphasize her more. That's how I felt, at least. And now we're getting into the flats, which again, these are straight by the numbers flats. There's not a lot going on here. I didn't do much shadowing, shading of any kind, none of that, except for just a little bit right there that was sort of a cast down from her skirt. And then I get into doing some makeup stuff. Like I've done in other pieces, I do a giant solid fill for the entirety of the robot arm. This is going to be my selection going forward. I'm going to keep selecting this over and over again to maintain where I'm exactly painting. And it's around this time that I start realizing, oh right, I made this canvas really, really big, so I have way less layers to deal with than I normally do. I think it's like 20 some layers, which was, it's not a lot if you follow how I usually paint, even when I'm doing flatted stuff like this. So I'm trying to just focus on how simple I want this entire thing to be. So the idea here was to do two varying darknesses to sort of imply a matte material and maybe a slightly shinier material, although I don't go crazy on the shines because I wanted the gold to pop. But it's really about just establishing there's some darker materials and some lighter materials. And then I've got this gold. I wanted the gold to be understated, not super yellow, but I wanted it to be shiny. So you can see here I brought in a pattern, just random one from the internet, of houndstooth. Got it to the frequency that I wanted it to be, sized it, and then just selected away and deleted anything that wasn't on the duller, brighter gray, because that's where I wanted that pattern to be. You can see I also added a slight drop shadow from her to the arm to try and separate her a little bit. And then we're going to get into some of the shine and shadows that I decided to add to the gold just to push things a little bit. So here we get a line duplication with a slight blur just to add some softness to that entire look, and then I start adding a black that's set to I think like 20%, and then you can see it suddenly got a little bit richer. I believe I switched that to an overlay, and then that's how we get some of that color. I added like a gradient darkness on the underside of that arm just to give it a little bit more of depth and bring some of the attention upward a bit. And there's just like a lot of sort of little detail-y stuff. Like here I'm adding that charm at the very bottom of the arm. You can see it starting to get filled in. I'll zoom in here. Quality's not the best, but you can see it. When it's actually in the image form, it's really clean and crisp, but not just the way it captures for this. And so now we just add a shine throughout the entire thing. It's white, but then it's set to overlay, and then I just dial it how I want it to be for saturation purposes, and erase away any part where the shadows were in order to clear the shine. So it's fairly straightforward, actually. Everything was essentially just, every decision was made just to try and maximize impact. That's essentially what I was going for on everything. So you see it lines only, and then here's with just her colored in, and then here she is with the arm colored in. So again, simple, a lot of tricks that are just really basic, but it's just about trying to use them in the best way possible. So thanks for watching. I hope you dug this one. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing, and I try to post as many as I can. And if you're looking for me on the internet, these are the places where you can find me.